And the Taliban gaining ground. That's where we begin tonight. Taliban continuing its resurgence in Afghanistan as American forces withdraw from that country. But Joe Biden believes military action is neither necessary nor the best course of action. Here's what he said today after announcing U.S. troops will depart Afghanistan after nearly 20 years of war.
If this isn't a mission accomplished moment, what is it in your view?
No, there's no mission accomplished.
How would you describe it?
The mission was accomplished in that we got Osama bin Laden, and terrorism is not emanating from that part of the world.
Not yet, anyway. Joining me now to weigh in, Texas Congressman and Foreign Affairs Ranking Member, Congressman Michael McCaul. Congressman, it's been a long time. Great to have you back. Many Americans believed it was time to get out of America's longest war, but the manner in which that we're doing it is it's got to be done responsibly. It's crucial to do it responsibly. We learned from General Tony Tata just yesterday that President Trump had a well-thought-out plan that Biden just scrapped. He abandoned it. It seems to me that Biden pulled out with all the care that Obama did when he pulled out irresponsibly of Iraq, leaving a vacuum for terrorists to fill. Am I wrong here?
No, I think the similarities are striking. And also, if you look at Saigon, when we got out of Vietnam, I think, you know, I talked to President Trump about Syria. You don't want to repeat the same mistakes of your predecessor in Iraq. And I talked to Secretary Mark Esper. They did have a plan to draw down, but it was done responsibly. My criticism is how irresponsible this plan is taking place. The president says he doesn't want to talk about hard things. He just wants to talk about nice things. Well, you know what? You're the commander in chief, and you are in charge of the hard things. I think he's in complete disillusionment of the intelligence community assessment that I've been briefed on. That's very grim right now in terms of the Taliban purportedly being able to take over within 6 months. I'm particularly worried also about these interpreters that fought alongside with our special forces. We promised we would take care of them. I think so far we're failing in that responsibility. And I do think the president's going to have blood on his hands at the end of the day if they are not saved. And, you know, the aftermath of this, it's so clear. It's going to be ugly. It's going to get worse. The Taliban most likely will take over. I worry about the embassy as well. I worry about Bagram Air Base. We just abandoned that and left it to the Afghans, who will probably be overtaken by the Taliban. Chris, that was the most strategic asset in the region for intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, for counterterrorism, and it's a buffer against Russia, China, and Iran. Now we've gone dark in the region. There will be long-term consequences to this, and President Biden is going to own it.
Yeah, let's turn our attention to the border and yours and my beloved Texas. The California Border Patrol is reporting numerous instances in which women, children, they're put through treacherous conditions by narco-terrorists who are taking advantage of Mr. Biden and his Democrat Socialist Party's open borders. The socialists in the Biden administration have created 3 crises down there, Congressman: a humanitarian, national security, and public health crisis. Are they unwilling or unable to fix their mess?
I think almost incompetent. I liked your monologue, your impersonation of the secretary sounding like a communist dictator. To me, I think this is a foreign policy blunder. Rescission of Remain in Mexico, the asylum cooperation agreements with Central America. Chris, this was working. The Trump administration got this right, and they rescinded these agreements only because it had President Trump's name on it. I think they had no idea what they were doing, and now they don't know how to fix it because they don't want to go back to Trump's policies. So what do we have? As you mentioned, a humanitarian crisis, a human trafficking crisis. It will be a sex trafficking crisis. And a national security crisis, along with, as you mentioned, when I was down there recently, overturning rafts with kids in them to divert the Border Patrol so the drugs can come in at another point sector of the border. And we're talking about really dangerous drugs like fentanyls. For the first time, Chris, in our home state, we've always been a pass-through state, but now we're seeing more and more young people unwittingly taking things that have fentanyls in them and never waking up. This is going to be an epidemic in this country, and Biden owns this one as well.
Good grief. Your colleague across the aisle, Radicalized Socialist Rashida M.F. Tlaib had this to say about countering Biden's border crisis. Listen.
We must eliminate funding for CPB, ICE, and their parent organization, DHS. Time after time, we have seen it as advocates on the ground, as human services agency on the ground, to continue to see over and over again that these agencies are inept.
Gosh, this is stupid. Congressman, whether it's defunding our police or defunding our ability to defend this nation, socialist Democrats seem hell-bent on making our nation and our people less safe. Can the Republicans stop them, or are we just at the mercy of these left-wing socialists until 2022?
Well, I think elections have consequences. I think this kind of rhetoric is going to really hurt the Democratic Party and damage them. People want protection at the border. They don't want an open border, and that's precisely what they've created. And I authorized ICE into law, and it was very bipartisan when I chaired Homeland Security, and yet now all these Democrats are against it. I'll tell you one thing that's interesting, Chris, in our home state was that the McCaul mayor's race went to a Republican. And we saw more counties move more and more towards the Republican Party because they see us as the party of security, of border security. We're against socialism. They think of Maduro and Castro. They're not thinking about Switzerland. And they have very conservative moral values like you and I share. As Catholics, we're pro-life. So I really think we've got a great opportunity in our state to not go the route of California, but win over that demographic population with our ideas. And I look forward to the next contest.
Amen to that. Yeah, 5 majority Latino counties down there on the border flipped from Hillary Clinton to Donald Trump in the last election. And it's only getting worse because liberty-loving Latinos down there also feel abandoned by the Socialist Democrat Party. Last thing. Another threat to the United States, left-wing media outlets like the Washington Post, they're finally calling for a serious investigation into the China virus origins. That same outlet, along with other biased press outlets, called those who found the lab leak theory credible conspiracy theorists. Now, without broaching on any classified information that you may have access to, what can you tell our audience about China's culpability in the development of and distribution of that China virus?
I think it's becoming increasingly clear to me that all roads do lead to the lab. We've received recent testimony and evidence coming out of that area. It's the worst cover-up in human history. I've always said, why would they all of a sudden erase their databases at the Wuhan lab? They didn't want to be tied to the first cases that broke out. Why would the PLA, the Chinese military, take over the lab in 2019 unless they had something to hide? And that's precisely what happened. They were involved in this gain-of-function research genetic manipulation to create a super SARS-like virus, to create a vaccine. They had a really sloppy track record of safety protocols that the State Department warned about. And I believe they violated those protocols and leaked what later became COVID-19. So, this is one of the worst pandemics in human history, with 4 million people dead, $10 trillion economy smashed. I think the first super spreader event was probably the military games in 2019 when you had 9,000 athletes all over the world. And finally, I think what's most offensive, Chris, is that you have this Peter Daszak guy with this Echo Health NGO getting money from our own NIH, taxpayer dollars, and collaborating with the bat lady at the Wuhan lab, publishing papers on gain of function and putting that money into the lab that created this horrible pandemic.
Absolutely atrocious. Hopefully, some investigators in Congress can get to the bottom of it. Guys like you. Congressman Michael McCaul, thank you very much for the time. It's always appreciated. We'll talk soon.